My name is Albert, and I am 67 years old. 2 years ago, I lost my wife Margaret to cancer. Last Sunday, my daughter Emily invited the whole family over for dinner to honor her memory. We were sitting around the table sharing stories about her when my son-in-law Derek's phone rang. He had left it face up on the table. And there it was. Margaret's face. My late wife's photograph lighting up his screen as the caller ID. The room went completely silent. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because what I discovered that night changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I spent 38 years of my life working as an electrician for a construction company in Columbus, Ohio. Every single morning I woke up at 4:30, packed my lunch in a brown paper bag, and headed out before the sun came up. I climbed scaffolding in the summer heat when temperatures reached 100 degrees. I worked through winter storms when my fingers went numb inside my gloves. I ran wires through walls, crawled through attics filled with insulation that made my skin itch for days, and balanced on ladders so tall that one wrong step could have ended everything. By the time I turned 45, my back was already giving me trouble. The doctor told me I had 2 herniated discs and that I needed to slow down. But slowing down was not an option. Emily was getting ready for college, and Margaret and I had promised her that she would graduate without debt. So I kept working. I took extra shifts on weekends. I picked up side jobs rewiring old houses in the evenings. Some nights I did not get home until 10 or 11, so exhausted that I could barely keep my eyes open during dinner. But I never complained. Not once. Because that is what a man does for his family. He provides. He sacrifices. He puts his own comfort last so that his wife and daughter can have a better life. That was the code I lived by, the same code my father taught me and his father before him. I met Margaret at a county fair when we were both 19 years old. She was standing in line for cotton candy wearing a yellow sundress with little white flowers on it. Her hair was the color of chestnuts falling in soft waves past her shoulders. When she turned around and smiled at me, I swear my heart stopped beating for a full 3 seconds. We talked for hours that night, walking through the fairgrounds until they started shutting down the rides. She told me she was studying to become a nurse, that she wanted to help people to make a difference in their lives. I told her I was learning a trade, that I was good with my hands, that I wanted to build something solid and real. By the end of the evening, I knew I was going to marry her someday. And I did. We got married 2 years later in a small church ceremony with only our closest family and friends. We could not afford a big wedding, but Margaret said she did not care about any of that. She said all she needed was me. For 42 years, she was everything to me. She was my best friend, my confidant, my rock. No matter how hard my day had been, no matter how tired or frustrated I felt, coming home to Margaret made everything better. She always had dinner ready when I walked through the door. Not because I expected it, but because that was who she was. She took care of people. It was in her nature. Even when Emily was a teenager, and we went through those difficult years when parents and children seemed to speak different languages, Margaret kept us connected. She was the bridge between us, always finding ways to bring us together, to smooth over disagreements, to remind us that we were a family, and that families stick together no matter what. The photograph that appeared on Derek's phone that night was one I had taken myself on Margaret's 60th birthday. We had thrown her a small party in our backyard, just close family, and a few of her friends from the hospital, where she had worked for over 3 decades. In the picture, she was sitting in a lawn chair with a slice of chocolate cake on her lap, laughing at something Emily had said. Her eyes were crinkled at the corners the way they always did when she was truly happy. It was my favorite photograph of her, and until that moment, I thought it was only stored in my phone and in the album I kept on my nightstand. When Margaret got sick, it happened fast. She had been feeling tired for a few weeks, losing weight even though she was eating normally. We thought it was just stress from retirement, from adjusting to a new routine. But then the pains started. Sharp stabbing pains in her abdomen that would wake her up in the middle of the night. The doctor ran tests, then more tests. Then they sent us to a specialist who sat us down in his office with a look on his face that I will never forget as long as I live. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The words hit me like a wrecking ball to the chest. They gave her 6 months. She lasted 5. I retired early to take care of her, spending every single day by her side. I held her hand during chemotherapy sessions. I fed her soup when she was too weak to hold a spoon. I read to her from her favorite books when she could not sleep. And I told her I loved her so many times that the words became like breathing, automatic and essential. On her last night, she made me promise 2 things. First, to take care of Emily. Second, to always trust our family. She said that family was the only thing that mattered in this world, that everything else was just noise. I held her hand and promised her I would honor both requests. She passed away at 3:17 in the morning, peacefully with me right there beside her. After the funeral, I felt like half of me had been buried along with her. The house felt empty. The bed felt too big. Every room held memories that both comforted me and broke my heart at the same time. But I had made a promise, so I kept going. I stayed connected with Emily as best I could. I tried to be a good father, a good grandfather to any future children she might have. Emily and Derek had been married for 8 years by the time Margaret passed. Derek was 37 years old, worked as a real estate manager for a big firm downtown. When he first started dating Emily, I liked him well enough. He was polite, well-spoken, knew how to hold a conversation. He would come over on weekends to help me with projects around the house, fixing a leaky faucet or patching up drywall. He seemed like a good man. The kind of man I was happy to see my daughter marry. In those early years, I treated Derek like a son. I invited him to watch football games with me. I taught him how to grill steaks the way my father had taught me. When he and Emily bought their first house, I spent 3 weekends helping them paint every room. I trusted him completely. I had no reason not to. But looking back now, I can see the signs that I missed. The way his eyes would sometimes flicker with something cold when he thought no one was watching. The way his compliments always seemed to have a slight edge to them, as if he was measuring you while he smiled. I did not see it then. I only saw what I wanted to see, what Margaret wanted me to see. A happy daughter with a loving husband. The first 3 months after Margaret died, Emily called me every single day, sometimes twice. She would check in during her lunch break, ask how I was doing, if I had eaten, if I needed anything from the store. On weekends, she would come over with groceries and we would cook dinner together, talking about her mother, sharing memories, keeping Margaret's spirit alive in the house she had loved so much. But then something changed. The calls became less frequent. Once a day turned into every other day, then once a week. Then I was lucky if I heard from her twice a month. When I would call her, she always seemed rushed, distracted. "I am sorry, Dad, I have got a meeting in 5 minutes. Can I call you back tonight?" But tonight never came. Or when it did, she would sound exhausted, saying she was too tired to talk for long. I told myself it was normal. She had her own life, her own career, her own marriage to maintain. She was a grown woman with responsibilities. I could not expect her to drop everything just to check on her old father. But deep down, a small part of me felt abandoned. Like the thread that connected us was slowly unraveling, and I did not know how to tie it back together. Derek's behavior changed even more noticeably. Before Margaret's death, he used to stop by at least once a week, sometimes on his way home from work. He would sit on the porch with me, have a beer, ask about my day. After she passed, those visits dried up completely. When I saw him at family gatherings, he was always glued to his phone, barely looking up when I spoke to him. His responses became shorter, more dismissive. I remember one afternoon, about 8 months after the funeral, I called Derek to ask if he could help me fix a leak in my roof. Nothing major, just a few shingles that had come loose during a storm. In the old days, he would have been over the next morning with his toolbox. But this time there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I would love to help, Albert," he said, "but work has been absolutely crazy lately. We have got 3 big deals closing this month. Maybe you should just call a professional." I ended up hiring a roofer who charged me $800 for what should have been a simple fix. Money that could have stayed in my savings if Derek had just spent an hour on a ladder. But I did not complain. I never complained. That was not my way. What bothered me more than the roof was the way Derek started talking to me. Little comments that sounded like concern but felt like something else entirely. "You know, Albert, you are not getting any younger. Maybe it is time to think about downsizing. Or I worry about you all alone in that big house. What if something happens and no one is there to help?" At first, I appreciated what I thought was genuine worry for my well-being. But the more he said these things, the more it felt like he was planting seeds, like he was trying to make me doubt myself, doubt my ability to live independently. The house Margaret and I had bought 30 years ago was located in a neighborhood that had changed dramatically since we first moved in. Back then, it was a modest working-class area full of families like ours who were just trying to build decent lives. But over the decades, the city had expanded, new businesses had moved in, and property values had skyrocketed. A house that we had paid $42,000 for was now worth close to $400,000. Derek knew this. He worked in real estate after all. Numbers like that were his bread and butter. The first time he mentioned selling, I thought it was a joke. He brought it up casually over Thanksgiving dinner about a year after Margaret passed. "You know, Albert," he said, cutting into his turkey, "a house like yours in this market could fetch a pretty penny. Have you ever thought about selling, moving somewhere smaller? Maybe closer to us?" I shook my head. "No. That is Margaret's home. Our home. Too many memories there." He nodded, but I caught the flicker of frustration in his eyes. "Just something to think about," he said. "We worry about you, that is all." After that, the subject came up more and more often. Sometimes it was Derek who brought it up. Sometimes it was Emily using almost the exact same words her husband had used, as if she had been coached. "Dad, would not it be easier if you did not have to worry about maintenance and property taxes? Dad, there is a lovely retirement community just 20 minutes from our place. You could see us whenever you wanted." I said no every time. The house was not just walls and a roof to me. It was where Emily had taken her first steps, where Margaret and I had celebrated 30 anniversaries, where I had built a life brick by brick, year by year. Selling it would feel like selling a piece of my soul. But Derek did not give up easily. I would come to learn that about him. The first moment I truly felt something was wrong happened about 14 months after Margaret died. I had decided to surprise Emily and Derek with a visit, bringing over some of Margaret's old recipes that I thought Emily might want. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw Derek standing in the backyard talking on his phone. He had his back to me, but I could tell from his posture that this was not a casual conversation. His shoulders were tense, his free hand gesturing sharply. I got out of my car quietly, not wanting to interrupt. But as I walked toward the house, I caught a fragment of what he was saying. "Do not worry, everything will be sorted out soon. The old man cannot hold on forever. He must have heard my footsteps because he spun around, his face going pale when he saw me. He said something quick into the phone, too quiet for me to hear, and then hung up. "Albert," he said, forcing a smile. "What a surprise. Emily did not tell me you were coming. I just stopped by to drop something off," I said, holding up the envelope of recipes. "Who was that on the phone?" "Oh, just work stuff," he said quickly. "You know how it is. Clients can be demanding." I nodded and let it go. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of losing Margaret was making me see shadows where there were none. But I could not shake the feeling that something was not right. The way he had looked at me when he turned around there had been guilt in his eyes. And something else too. Something that looked almost like fear. The second anniversary of Margaret's passing fell on a Sunday in October. The leaves were turning gold and red just the way she had always loved. Emily called me a few days before and said she wanted to host a small dinner at her house, just family, to remember Margaret and celebrate her life. I was touched by the gesture. It felt like the old Emily, the daughter who used to call me every day, who used to sit with me for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Maybe things were finally getting better between us. Maybe the distance of the past 2 years had just been grief working its way through all of us. I spent the morning of the dinner looking through old photo albums, selecting pictures to bring along. Margaret in her wedding dress, looking up at me with those beautiful blue eyes. Margaret holding newborn Emily in the hospital, exhausted, but radiating joy. Margaret and me on our 40th anniversary, standing in front of the house we had built our life in. Each photograph was a window into a past that felt both impossibly distant and achingly close. When I arrived at Emily and Derek's house that evening, I was surprised to see another car in the driveway. It belonged to Derek's grandmother, Frances, a woman of 79 who had always been kind to me at family gatherings. She was quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed things that others missed. Inside the house was warm and smelled like roasted chicken. Emily had set the dining table with Margaret's good china, the set we had given her as a wedding present. Seeing it made my chest tight with emotion. "Dad," Emily said, hugging me at the door. "I am so glad you are here." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, holding her close. "This means a lot." Derek greeted me with a handshake and a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He was wearing a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the successful businessman. Frances was already seated at the table, her silver hair pinned back neatly, her sharp eyes watching everything. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We passed dishes around the table, shared stories about Margaret, laughed about old memories. I brought out the photo album I had carried with me, and Emily's eyes glistened with tears as she turned the pages. "I miss her so much," she whispered. "I know, baby," I said, putting my arm around her. "I miss her too." Throughout the meal, I noticed Derek checking his phone repeatedly. He tried to be subtle about it, glancing down at his lap, but I could see the screen lighting up his face. Each time his expression would shift slightly, a tightening around his jaw, a flicker of something in his eyes. We were just finishing dessert, a chocolate cake that Emily had baked using Margaret's recipe, when it happened. Derek's phone rang. He had placed it face up on the table beside his plate, probably forgetting it was there. The screen lit up, and the ringtone, some generic pop song, cut through the quiet conversation. Everyone looked at the phone, and everyone saw what I saw. The caller ID showed a photograph of Margaret, my wife. The same picture I had taken on her 60th birthday, the one of her laughing with cake on her lap. Beneath the photo, the contact name showed only a single letter. M. The room went silent. Emily's face drained of color. Frances set down her fork with a soft clink. Derek grabbed the phone so fast he nearly knocked over his water glass, jabbing at the screen to decline the call. "Sorry about that," he said, his voice too loud, too forced. "Spam callers. You would not believe how many I get these days." He shoved the phone into his pocket and reached for his wine glass, taking a long drink. But his hand was trembling. I could see it from across the table. Nobody said anything. Emily stared at her plate. Frances looked at Derek with an expression I could not quite read. And I sat there, my heart pounding so hard, I could feel it in my temples, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Why was my dead wife's photograph on my son-in-law's phone? I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible explanation. Maybe Derek had saved some of my photos as a way to honor Margaret. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent reason for a contact named M to have her picture. Maybe I was seeing things that were not there, my grieving mind playing tricks on me. But none of those explanations felt right. Derek had never been particularly close to Margaret. He was polite to her, sure, but there was no special bond between them that would justify having her photograph as a caller ID. And the way he had reacted, the panic in his eyes, the way he had practically lunged for the phone, that was not the behavior of a man with nothing to hide. I got out of bed around 3 a.m. and walked to the living room where Margaret's portrait hung above the fireplace. I stood there in the darkness, looking at her face, wishing more than anything that she could tell me what was going on. "Was there something you did not tell me?" I whispered to the empty room. "Something between you and Derek." The thought made me sick to my stomach. Margaret and I had shared everything with each other. At least I had always believed we did. Could she have been hiding something from me? Could she have betrayed me in a way I never imagined? I shook my head, rejecting the idea. That was not who Margaret was. That was not our marriage. There had to be another explanation, and I was going to find it. The next few days, I found myself watching Derek more carefully whenever we were together. I noticed how he always kept his phone in his pocket, now never leaving it on the table like he used to. I noticed how he avoided making eye contact with me, how he seemed to find excuses to leave the room whenever I entered it. I decided to visit Derek's office, a real estate firm, in a sleek downtown building, under the pretense of stopping by to say hello. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red lipstick and perfectly manicured nails, smiled at me when I walked in. "Can I help you, sir? I am Albert," I said. "Derek's father-in-law." "Is he in?" "Oh," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "He is actually in a meeting right now. Can I take a message? That is all right. I will just wait." I sat down in the lobby, flipping through a magazine I was not really reading, keeping my ears open. After about 20 minutes, the receptionist took a phone call that seemed to require most of her attention. While she was distracted, I wandered over to the water cooler near her desk, pretending to get a drink. That is when I overheard her say something that made my blood run cold. "Yes, Mrs. Margaret called earlier. I told her Derek would call back after his 3 o'clock. Mrs. Margaret, a woman named Margaret, who was calling Derek at work. My Margaret had been dead for 2 years. I left the office without saying goodbye, my mind racing. There was another Margaret in Derek's life, someone he was in contact with regularly enough that the receptionist knew her by name. Someone whose photograph might be saved in his phone under a single letter. I drove home in a daze, pulled into my driveway, and sat in the car for a long time without moving. Then I walked inside, went straight to Margaret's portrait, and felt tears streaming down my face. "I am sorry," I said to her, "for even thinking you could have done something like that. I am so sorry." But my relief at knowing Margaret had not betrayed me was quickly replaced by a new emotion: anger. Because if there was another woman named Margaret in Derek's life, one whose picture looked exactly like my late wife, then something very wrong was going on. And I needed to find out exactly what it was. 1 week after the dinner, my phone rang while I was eating breakfast. The caller ID showed Frances, Derek's grandmother. We had exchanged numbers years ago, but had rarely spoken outside of family gatherings. "Albert," she said, her voice quiet and strained. "I need to see you. Today, if possible. There is something important we need to discuss." Something in her tone told me this was not a social call. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, a place where neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. Frances was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea she had not touched. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, as if the weight of something heavy was pressing down on her shoulders. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I sat down across from her. "I was not sure you would. You sounded worried on the phone. What is going on, Frances?" She took a deep breath, her thin fingers wrapped around the teacup, as if drawing warmth from it. "I have been carrying something for months now," she said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago. But I was afraid. Afraid of what it would do to the family, to Emily, to everyone." I leaned forward, my heart beating faster. "Tell me." Frances met my eyes and I saw tears forming in hers. "The woman on Derek's phone," she said, "the one whose photograph you saw. Her name is not Margaret. It is Margot. She is 52 years old and she is having an affair with my grandson." For a moment I could not breathe. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with an iron fist. "What did you say?" Margot Frances repeated, her voice breaking. "Derek has been seeing her for almost a year. He saves her number under the letter M, and he uses your wife's photograph as the contact picture. That way, if Emily ever sees his phone, she will think it is just an old photo of her mother. She would never suspect." The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "He uses Margaret's picture to hide his affair." Frances nodded, a tear sliding down her wrinkled cheek. "I found out by accident. Derek left his phone at my house a few months ago, and I saw the messages. He was texting Margot about meeting at hotels, about their future together. There were photographs." Frances paused, swallowing hard. I confronted him about it, and he begged me not to tell anyone. He said he would end it. But he did not. I know he did not because I have seen them together since then. I sat back in my chair, feeling as if the ground had dropped out from under me. All this time, Derek had been betraying my daughter, and he had been using my dead wife's memory to do it. "There is more," Frances said quietly. "I wish there was not, but there is." I looked at her, not sure I could take another blow. "What else?" Frances reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in Derek's home office last month," she said, sliding it across the table. "It is a printout of nursing homes in the area. And there are notes in Derek's handwriting about your house, about its value, about how long probate takes when someone passes away." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was exactly as she described. A list of facilities with names like Shady Oaks and Autumn Pines, prices, per month availability notes, and in the margins, Derek's cramped handwriting. House value estimated $400,000. Emily sole inheritor. If A passes, liquidate assets within 6 months. If A passes. A. Albert. Me. My God, I whispered. He is planning something. Frances said, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not know exactly what, but I know it involves getting control of your property. I heard him talking to Margot about it once. He said, and I remember his exact words. "The old man will be in a home soon enough, and then that house will be ours." I stared at the paper, trying to process what I was seeing. My son-in-law, the man I had treated like a son, was not just cheating on my daughter. He was plotting to take everything I had: my home, my savings, my independence. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked Frances. "After keeping silent for so long, because I am 79 years old," she said, her voice cracking. "Because I have heart problems, and my doctor says I might not have much time left. And because I cannot die with this on my conscience. You are a good man, Albert. You do not deserve what Derek is planning. Neither does Emily." I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. It was thin and cold, like a bird's wing. "You did the right thing," I said. It took courage to tell me this. "What will you do?" she asked. I sat there for a long moment thinking about Margaret, about the promise I had made to her on her deathbed, to protect Emily, to trust our family. "I am going to protect my daughter," I said finally. "And I am going to make sure Derek never hurts anyone in my family again." When I left the coffee shop, my mind was clearer than it had been in years. The confusion and self-doubt I had felt since Margaret's death had been burned away, replaced by a cold, steady determination. Derek had made his plans. Now I would make mine. My first call was to Harold, my oldest friend, and a retired lawyer who had helped Margaret and me write our wills 20 years ago. Harold was 71 now, sharp as ever despite his age, and he had a network of contacts that stretched across half of Ohio. "Albert," he said when he heard my voice, "it has been too long." "How are you holding up?" "Not well, Harold. I need your help." Over lunch at his house, I told him everything. The phone call at dinner, Frances's revelations, the notes about nursing homes and asset liquidation. Harold listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That son of a bitch," he said when I finished. "Pardon my language, but that is exactly what he is. A calculating, manipulative son of a bitch." "I need evidence," I said. "Something concrete that Emily cannot deny, that Derek cannot explain away. Frances's word is a start, but I need more." Harold nodded slowly. "I know a man. Former police detective, works as a private investigator now. Name is Raymond. He is discreet, thorough, and he does not ask questions he does not need to ask. If Derek is doing what you say he is doing, Raymond will find the proof." 2 days later, I met Raymond at a diner on the edge of the city. He was 55, heavy-set, but solid, with the watchful eyes of someone who had spent decades reading people. He listened to my story with professional detachment, making occasional notes in a small leather notebook. "I can have preliminary findings for you within 2 weeks, he said. "Photographs, audio if possible, documentation of his movements and contacts. My fee is $1,500 up front, another $1,000 when I deliver the final report." I wrote him a check on the spot. For the next 14 days, I went about my life as if nothing had changed. I smiled at Derek when I saw him at a family brunch. I made small talk with Emily about her work. I played the part of the oblivious old man, harmless and easily dismissed. But inside, I was waiting. When Raymond finally called, I drove to his office immediately. He handed me a thick manila folder, his face grim. "It is all there," he said. Photos of Derek with a woman named Margot Sullivan. They have been meeting at the Riverside Inn every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for the past 3 months. He also has a separate bank account that Emily does not know about. Small deposits, nothing that would trigger red flags, but they add up. He is building a nest egg for when he leaves her. I opened the folder and saw photograph after photograph. Derek and Margot holding hands in a restaurant. Derek and Margot kissing in a parking lot. Derek and Margot walking into a hotel room together. There is more, Raymond said. I managed to record a phone conversation between Derek and Margot. They were discussing you. He pressed play on a small digital recorder. Derek's voice filled the room, distorted slightly by the recording quality, but unmistakably his. The old man is stubborn, but he cannot last forever. Once he is in a home, we sell the house and split the proceeds. Emily will do whatever I tell her. She always does. I felt my hands trembling as I listened. Not with fear, with anger. A deep, righteous anger that I had not felt in years. This is everything I need, I said to Raymond. Thank you. Now comes the hard part, he replied. Deciding what to do with it. I already knew what I was going to do, but there was one more thing I needed to understand first. I needed to know if my daughter was complicit in her husband's schemes, or if she was as much a victim as I was. I called Emily and asked her to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us, no Derek. She sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a small cafe near her office. She looked tired, I noticed. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide, and she kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger. Is everything okay, Dad? She asked. You sounded serious on the phone. I am fine, I said. I just wanted to check on you. How are things at home with Derek? She hesitated, a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Fine, she said. Everything is fine, Emily, I said gently. Look at me. She raised her eyes and I saw something there I had not seen before. Fear, uncertainty, the look of someone who knows something is wrong but cannot bring herself to admit it. Are you happy? I asked. For a long moment she did not answer. Then slowly her composure cracked. Her lip trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. I do not know anymore, Dad, she whispered. I honestly do not know. I reached across the table and took her hand. Whatever is going on, I said, you can tell me. I am your father. Nothing will change that. But she shook her head, wiping her eyes with her free hand. It is nothing. Really. Just stress from work. I did not push her. Not yet. I needed to let her come to the truth in her own time. But I left that cafe knowing two things for certain. First, Emily was not part of Derek's scheme. She was trapped in a marriage with a man who had been manipulating her for years, isolating her from her family, making her doubt herself. And second, I was going to free her. I spent the next week planning. Every detail had to be perfect. Derek was clever, and if I made a single mistake, he would find a way to spin things in his favor. I decided to host a dinner at my house. A small gathering to celebrate Margaret's memory, I told everyone. Just family. Emily and Derek, of course. Francis, who deserved to see justice done. And Harold, who I introduced as an old friend of Margaret's from the hospital. Derek had no idea that Harold was a lawyer. He had no idea that Raymond's folder full of evidence was sitting in my desk drawer. He had no idea that this dinner would be the end of everything he had built. The night arrived. I spent the afternoon cooking, making Margaret's favorite dishes from recipes I had memorized over 40 years of marriage. The house smelled like roast beef and fresh bread, like Sunday dinners and family gatherings, like everything good and wholesome that Derek had tried to corrupt. They arrived together, Emily and Derek, around 6 o'clock. Frances came shortly after, moving slowly, but with a determined set to her jaw. Harold arrived last, carrying a bottle of wine and a briefcase that he left by the door. This is so nice, Dad, Emily said, looking around the dining room. Just like when Mom was alive. That is the idea, sweetheart, I said, hugging her close. Derek shook my hand with his usual smooth smile. Great spread, Albert. You have outdone yourself. Thank you, Derek. Please, everyone, sit down. We ate, we talked, we shared memories of Margaret. For a little while, it almost felt like old times. Emily laughed at stories she had heard 100 times before. Even Derek seemed relaxed, probably thinking that his plans were proceeding smoothly, that the naive old man suspected nothing. After dessert, I stood up and cleared my throat. Before we finished for the night, I said I have a few announcements to make. Derek glanced up, still smiling. Sure, Albert. What is on your mind? I reached under the table and pulled out the manila folder. Well, first I want to talk about something that happened at our last dinner. At Emily's house. When your phone rang. Derek's smile flickered. The spam call, what about it? I opened the folder and laid the first photograph on the table. A picture of Derek and Margot kissing in a parking lot. I know about Margot, I said quietly. The room went absolutely still. Emily stared at the photograph, her face going white. Derek's smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. What the hell is this? He demanded. I kept going, placing more photographs on the table, one after another. Derek at the hotel. Derek at the restaurant. Derek transferring money into a secret account. I know about the affair, I said. I know about the bank account Emily does not know exists. I know about your plans to put me in a nursing home and sell this house. Derek lunged to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. Emily, your father has lost his mind. But Emily was not looking at him. She was looking at the photographs, tears streaming down her face. I also have this, I said, pulling out the recorder. A conversation between you and Margot. Would you like me to play it? For the first time, I saw real fear in Derek's eyes. He looked at Frances, who was watching him with an expression of profound disappointment. You, he said to her. You told him. I did what was right, Frances said, her voice steady. Something you have never understood. Derek turned back to me, his face twisted with rage. You have no right. You are just a senile old man who cannot accept that the world has moved on without him. Emily knows who really cares about her. Do you not, Emily? He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Do not touch me, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Do not you dare touch me. Derek stared at her, clearly not expecting resistance. Emily, be reasonable. I have been reasonable for 8 years, she said, standing up from the table. I have made excuses for you. I have believed your lies. I have let you turn me against my own father. She looked at me, her eyes full of regret. Dad, I am so sorry. He was always telling me things about you. That you were getting confused. That you were not handling Mom's death well. That we should not trust your judgment anymore. I know, sweetheart, I said gently. I know it was not your fault. Emily turned back to Derek and her voice hardened. I want a divorce, and I want you out of my life. Derek's face went red with fury. You think you can just throw me away after everything I have done? Do you have any idea what I have sacrificed? You have sacrificed nothing, I said, stepping forward. You have only taken from Emily, from me, from the memory of my wife whose photograph you used to hide your infidelity. I shook my head slowly. But it is over now, Derek. You have nothing left to take. Harold stood up, clearing his throat. I should mention, he said calmly, that Emily signed a prenuptial agreement before your marriage. All assets she brought into the marriage, including her inheritance from her mother and any future inheritance from her father, remain solely hers. You have no claim to any of it. Derek stared at Harold, then at me, then at Emily. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I think it is time for you to leave, I said. And I want to make something clear. You used my wife's photograph to deceive my daughter. You disrespected Margaret's memory in the worst possible way. But I am not going to waste my energy hating you. I pity you, Derek, because you are going to spend the rest of your life knowing that you destroyed everything you had and you have no one to blame but yourself." For a long moment, Derek stood there, fists clenched at his sides. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door. I watched him go, then turned to Emily, who was sobbing in her chair. I knelt beside her and pulled her into my arms. "It is going to be okay," I whispered. "We are going to get through this, together." She held on to me like she had when she was a little girl, afraid of thunderstorms, and I held her back, my own tears falling silently into her hair. We stayed that way for a long time. The weeks that followed were not easy. I would be lying if I said they were. Pain does not disappear overnight, just because the source of it has been removed. It lingers. It echoes. It wakes you up at 3 a.m. with memories you wish you could forget. At first, I found myself sitting alone in the living room at odd hours, staring at Margaret's portrait, replaying everything that had happened. Not the dinner, not Derek's exposure, but the 2 years before it. All the signs I had missed, all the moments when I could have seen the truth, if I had just looked a little harder. I wondered if Margaret would have noticed sooner. She had always been better at reading people than I was. She would have seen through Derek's charm from the beginning. She would have protected Emily before things ever got this far. But Margaret was gone, and the protecting fell to me now. So that is what I did. Emily moved back into her childhood room while the divorce proceedings worked their way through the courts. It was strange at first having someone else in the house again after 2 years of solitude. Strange but good. The silence that had felt so oppressive now felt like peaceful quiet instead. There was another heartbeat in the house, another presence, another reason to get up in the morning. We talked a lot during those first weeks. Really talked the way we had not talked in years. Emily told me about her marriage, about the slow erosion of her confidence under Derek's constant criticism. "He never yelled," she said. "He just made me feel like everything I did was wrong. Like I was not smart enough, not pretty enough, not anything enough." After a while, I started believing him. I listened without judgment. I did not tell her she should have seen it sooner, should have been stronger, should have come to me for help. None of that would have done any good. What she needed was not criticism, but support. Not lectures, but love. Sometimes we would cook dinner together using Margaret's old recipes. Sometimes we would watch old movies that Margaret had loved, laughing and crying at the same parts she would have laughed and cried at. And sometimes we would just sit on the porch in silence, watching the sunset, feeling the presence of the woman we both missed so much. Slowly, the grief gave way to something else. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of peace, an acceptance that what had happened was now behind us, that the wounds would heal in time, that life would go on. Harold came by often during those months, checking on both of us, offering legal advice about the divorce. Frances visited too, her health fragile but her spirit intact. She and I would sit in the kitchen drinking tea, talking about families and loyalty and what it meant to do the right thing even when it was hard. "I never blamed you," I told her once, "for keeping quiet as long as you did." She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "I blamed myself enough for both of us. But thank you, Albert, for understanding." The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in March, 6 months after the dinner that changed everything. Emily walked out of the courthouse looking like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had lost a husband, yes, but she had found herself again. That was worth more than any marriage. Derek tried to contest the prenuptial agreement, of course. He hired a lawyer and made a lot of noise about emotional distress and unfair treatment. But Harold's work was ironclad, and in the end, Derek walked away with exactly what he deserved. Nothing. I heard later that Margot had left him too once it became clear there would be no windfall from my house. Derek ended up moving to another state, starting over somewhere nobody knew his name. I did not wish him ill. I did not wish him anything at all. He simply ceased to matter. As for me, I stayed in the house Margaret and I had built our life in. I kept her garden, planted new flowers in the spring, watched them bloom and fade and bloom again with the turning of the seasons. I joined a club for retired folks at the community center, made a few new friends, started playing chess again like I used to when I was younger. Emily got her own apartment eventually, a nice place about 15 minutes from my house. Close enough to visit, often far enough to have her own space. She seemed happier than she had been in years. Lighter. More like the daughter I remembered from before Derek, before the manipulation and the doubt. Every Sunday she comes over for dinner. We cook together, we talk about our weeks. We remember Margaret with love instead of grief. It is not the same as it was when my wife was alive. Nothing will ever be the same. But it is good. It is real. It is ours. Sometimes in quiet moments I think about what Margaret asked me to do in her final hours. Take care of Emily. Trust our family. I kept my promises, sweetheart, I whisper to her portrait. Both of them. And I think wherever she is, she knows. What I learned from everything that happened is this: not everyone deserves your trust. Some people will smile at your face while planning to take everything you have. They will use the things you love, even the people you love, as tools for their own gain. And if you are not careful, they will succeed. But that does not mean you should stop trusting. It means you should be wise about who earns that trust. It means you should pay attention to the signs, listen to your instincts, and never be afraid to act when the truth reveals itself. Family is not just blood. Family is the people who stand beside you when the storm comes. Frances was not my blood, but she stood beside me. Harold was not my blood, but he stood beside me. And Emily, my own daughter, found her way back to me when she finally saw the truth. The pain I felt, the betrayal, the anger, none of it lasted forever. What lasted was the love. The love Margaret and I built over 42 years. The love between a father and his daughter. The love that cannot be stolen or manipulated or taken away by anyone, no matter how hard they try. So here I am, 67 years old, sitting on the porch of the house where my wife and I raised our family. The sun is setting. The air smells like autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Inside, dinner is cooking on the stove, and in a little while Emily will be here, and we will sit together and talk and laugh and remember. Life is not perfect. It never was, and it never will be. But it is mine, and I am grateful for every single day of it. If you have made it this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you trusted? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. We are all going through something, and sometimes it helps just to know we are not alone. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. If you want to hear more stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And remember, no matter how dark things get, there is always a way forward. You just have to be brave enough to take the first step. Until next time.